Hey, this is your girl BMORE, and you're watching Dummies. You're watching Dummies Cauldron. Okay, guys, so today we want to be talking about the recently released trailer of Black Panther 2 Wakanda Forever. I am a Black Panther lover. Don't ask me about no comic stuff because I never read the comics, so none of that. Don't come in here and be like, actually, with a highlighter and a Sharpie. So, but no, I do love the movies. I do like the iconography of it. I might actually was considering getting into the comic book reading like at some point because I do find the plots and the stories interesting. But yeah, so we're going to be talking about the trailer. So interesting things that I saw in the trailer, like off top. So we see Namor standing in front of a wall and his hands runs over the wall, and we see a feather serpent deity. So most of the time when you think about the Mayans and the Aztecs, they do have overlapping culture in Mesoamerican folklore. And so we see Kukulkan, Quetzalcoatl. I said that wrong. Quetzalcoatl, that's it. Boom. And we also have Kuukumats. They all are feather serpent deities, and they all imply divinity. They also imply that they're messenger gods or spirits, however you look at it, from the heavenly realms or the higher realms to the king or whoever's noble. And so his hands runs around it, and we also see, like, inside the serpent's mouth, we see Tohil, which is a solar deity who is aided by the serpent deity to help him get to the zenith or the height where the sun is its highest. And so we have our solar height when we get solstices, and solstices happen twice a year. They happen in the summer and they happen in the winter. So the summer solstice for all the Avatar lovers are when the sun is going to be at its height or at its quote-unquote strongest. And so we see the serpent deity take him all the way to the top so that way he can be at his peak. You also get the lowest part in December when it's at its weakest. We also have the equinox. So traditionally, like Kukulmats, he has a temple, and so at some point you see Lupita standing, her character Nakia standing on the beach, but behind you see like a Mesoamerican temple. I'm actually wagering that could be the temple of Kukulmats, or inspired by the temple, because the temple is built really for the equinoxes. And so the difference between the equinox and a solstice is the equinox marks a time when day and night are equal. This is why people try to do daylight savings and stuff like that. Is usually around the equinoxes. So you do it around March, and then you do it around September. So what happens if you ever venture to see the temple? I never have. I actually really want to, because I just think it's like cool and pretty. What you'll see is that the way the temple is built, the sun kind of drips down the steps, and it leads to like the way the steps are built, almost like a statue. And on the side of it is the serpent deity Kukulmats, and the sun flows down, or Quetzalcoatl or Kukulmats. It flows down as if the sun is leading or showing that the sun and the energy of the sun are kind of one and the same of these feather serpent deities, or it's aiding the sun in some way. So it's very similar to like the folklore, and it's very similar to the story of Kukulkan or Kukulmats and Tohil bringing him to the height of the zenith. So yeah, I think it's really interesting. The next thing that we see, obviously we see the Panther iconography with the Dora Milaje standing in front of this red wall. I love the Dora Milaje. First of all, even if we just get into like historical fashions, like I do think that their outfits look cool. They look cool. I almost wanted to shave my head, but I know my head is not built for that. So but yeah, they look really cool. But we see different images behind them. So we see a tree. We see a second image that I'm not really sure what it is, because it's kind of clipped and I can't really get all of it. We see the sun, and then we see the panther. So the first one with the tree, it can imply like the tree of life. It can also imply going to different realms or to different worlds, which makes sense because the Black Panther, or panthers in general, are supposed to be messengers, the same as this feather serpent, between two realms and two different portals. And so it goes from one realm to the next, but trees also identify that as well. So trees can imply different realms, different bodies, or like the human body in its perfection, and how it can mimic the heavenly realm or mimic God in a way. It also can imply fertility and sometimes divine knowledge or sacred knowledge that they have acquired. The second one, again, like I told you, I'm not sure about that symbol, so don't quote me on nothing. nothing. But then we get to the sun. The sun is explanatory enough, but it gives us power, it gives us life force, vitality, also gives us divine will, or the strength of the will. The soul is fortified through the will, so it becomes a vehicle. It also can be implied God. So usually like primary gods are seen in a solar like way, or they're centered around it, or a lot of stories are centered around solar deities. Some examples of solar deities would be like Hercules, Jesus, Apollo. So these are like centered or primary solar deities that things center around. The last image we have is of a cat, of a panther. That makes sense. It's enough explained. The movie is called Black Panther. It's a series. But what I find interesting is that the sun and the panther are placed together. And so what we do know is that in this series, they worship Bast, and so she's a ancient Egyptian deity linked to home, fertility, childcare, but also protection. But Bast is also associated with solar and lunar principles, but a lot of lunar principles. And so because the panther is linked to the night and it's also linked to the sun, it kind of exhibits both ways, where it's dualistic and it's the sun and night. And so the sun and night, or the sun and the moon, I guess you could say lunar. And so what we see with lunar principles is the soul having to figure out who you are, sorrow, things that are tied to your family, unknown things, illusions, fantasy, magic, things that are just out of this world and phantasmal. But we see stuff like that, having to figure out who you are and your identity. And so we see that parallel right next to the sun. And so what we're going to get is dualistic nature. And that's what we get with the deity Bast. And she has a dualistic nature of the solar and lunar principles, particularly with the her other side of Sekhmet. So we get the sun for Sekhmet, but then we also get the lunar for Bast. Yeah, so we have a dualistic nature of their deity, which will be Bast, and what she represents in the sun and the moon, and how divine will, vitality, being in the sun, being noble, and understanding, taking up space and understanding who you are and what you own, and protection and children, in certain regards, authority and happiness, in a polarity of being unsure, mystery, things that are done in the cover of night, feelings, things that are tied to families and mothers, things that could be linked to sorrow and betrayal and confusion. They're tied together, and we see this parallel a lot. We also see it with the consort. So if Sekhmet and Bast are the same deity, or they're emanations, that's the word that you need to understand. When you read up on it, that's what they'll use. So they're emanations of each other. Well, their consort, which would be, I guess you could say, their partners or lovers or husbands, would be Thoth, and it would be Ta. So Ta is the deity of creation, particularly through the tongue and the lips, is associated or heavily linked to Sekhmet / Bast. And Thoth is the flip side, like how Sekhmet and Bast are the flip side to each other. He's the flip side to Ta. So Ta and Thoth are kind of the same thing. So Thoth will exhibit the divine mind through creation, and Ta will exhibit the divine tongues and lips through creation as well. And so what we get is the spoken word versus the divine mind. All of these kind of rope into each other, and when things become consorts, they marry into each other, they share an energy. And so in part 2 of this, we'll get into what energy are they sharing, and how this could be translated in the story of Black Panther, and what we could see in the series in the future with the second one coming out. Also, we'll be having a series on the first movie, if anyone is interested, about the spiritual implications that goes on, that we can see, like constantly just viewing it in the first movie. If you're interested in any readings, you can contact me at 410-705-5305 or at thedummiescauldron.com. Not .com. Why did I say that? At thedummiescauldron@gmail.com. Bye.